All right, this is my guy, Rhett Lewis, who the hardest working man in
Let's go.
sports media. He's on my broadcast team for the Big Ten Network. He is on NFL Network constantly, and he's on NFL radio constantly. And I know he's dialed because he played football in Indiana. He watches a ton of tape. And I didn't quite know before I met Rhett how talented Rhett is.
Oh.
So it's great to have you. And I love hanging with him.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. So what are you doing here? You're coming into a hornet's nest here potentially, depending on your takes. National people, they come in with takes. Everyone's like, screw this guy.
Get out of here.
But right now, it's good for you if you got some negative takes because everybody's mad.
Everybody's got.
Where are you at on the Niners right now, Rhett? I know you went back and watched their game on Monday morning.
Yeah, I sure did. And look, I think ultimately you're not going to see a 3-interception game for Brock Purdy very often. I know he's had a couple of clunkers, right? Since he's been the starter, and unfortunately some of them have come against some really good opponents, right? You can go back to the Ravens, before and all that, but I think you're seeing uncharacteristic plays from Brock Purdy, probably because this is a very unfamiliar and uncomfortable situation for him. He is not only playing without Christian McCaffrey, which has been for the entire season, but Deebo Samuel essentially out in this game with the illness, right? And then you lose Brandon Ayuk. And I just think at some point, like, it's really flipping hard to run your offense the way you want to run it without your 3 best players. And look, and George Kittle obviously is still there and is in that conversation, but it's just really difficult to make up that kind of offensive production. And I think you're just kind of starting to see that wear on this offense. So much so you're seeing Kyle Shanahan do things with this offense that you haven't seen guy in a long time. Like they are definitely way underneath their play action numbers that they have been traditionally. And part of that is McCaffrey's absence. Part of that is the receivers kind of coming in and out. So like when you look at contenders in the NFC, they are the anti-Lions right now. Like they don't have answers. Whereas like when you look at the Lions, who I believe are the team to beat in the NFC, they have all the answers. They can beat you any way they want. On the ground, through the air, any different way with any of their targets. It's a fun place to be if you're Detroit. And right now, it's a really hard place to be if you're a San Francisco 49er fan.
Yeah, I've wondered, I have to check, like, am I looking at the NFC wrong? Because one thing I said after the game was the Niners have been incredibly unlucky in many ways.
Sure.
But they're also lucky in the sense that they are in the NFC West in 2024 without an elite team in their division. All they have to do is win their division. But, you could also argue, well, hold on, maybe there's not an obvious, like, other than Detroit, if you think Detroit can win the Super Bowl, which I'm iffy on, but they can certainly get there. And if you get there, you got a shot. Minnesota, I thought Minnesota was going to get put away by Detroit on Sunday. They didn't. They came back in that game. Credit to Minnesota. You could also look at the NFC and go, yeah, maybe there's not, like, multiple Super Bowl championship level teams.
Sure.
But it's just a really like if you're trying to get to 10 wins, it's just going to be hard because everyone's just pretty good. And as the Niners, you go from being, a quarter away from being the best team in the world.
Yeah.
To being like, are you a top 8? Are you a top 10 team?
Right.
In your conference? So, I guess the question is like, if they find a way to beat Dallas this week, they're a 500 team heading into the bye. Are they in okay shape at that point?
Yeah. And like for a lot of the reasons that you just pointed out, Guy, and it's like, when I look at this in the landscape of the NFC, like I think wild card weekend is going to be insane. Like, because you're going to have teams winning divisions, at 9, like look at the NFC South. I don't know what's going to happen there. I think the Bucs are probably the most elite team in that division, but who really knows there? And the NFC North might send all 4 teams to the playoffs the way that they're playing right now. They got, every team in that division is at least 2 games above 500. Only division in football that has that. And if the Bears kind of can continue that way, I mean, they're in the cellar at 4-2, a pretty good place to be. And so the couple of the things to think about on that front is like, I think the Eagles are starting to figure it out offensively, which is a little scary with A.J. Brown back in the lineup. Saquon has given them an immeasurable lift on the ground. And obviously they have a good offensive line. Their pass rush is starting to come on too. And look, I get it. The Giants make people feel like that a lot this year. But I would keep an eye on what's going on with Philly. If Jaden Daniels doesn't miss extensive time, like you can't count out the Commanders right now. He's just so dang dynamic. But I guess to say all that is I think you're going to have a cluster of teams that are going to be sitting there in that 9 to 11 win range. And
it's a cluster, all right, Rhett.
Yeah.
It's a real cluster.
A cluster what?
It's a cluster
of teams. So I do think I'm never going to count on a Kyle Shanahan coach team. Like, I just think that he can find ways, right, to manufacture, but they got to get Debo back next week with the illness. Hopefully all that's settled, and you keep him in the lineup and keep him healthy. Incredible to see Ricky Pearsall back on the field. And, hopefully this is, kind of a stepping stone for him, and he can kind of continually, maybe this is a point like where, a rookie, kind of like we saw Rashee Rice last year, really come on in the second half of the season for Kansas City. Maybe Pearsall starting later starts to hit his stride when the Niners might really need it, right? In that last 5-game push of the season, something to think about. And then what do you get from McCaffrey when he comes back? If he does come back week 10,
that's
what people are talking about.
Yeah. Does he come back? Yeah. There's the Shanahan conversation too, which, it's funny with him. There are so many things that point to him being an elite coach. Mm-hmm. And then there's so many things that you're like, what? He's 0-40 when he's trailing by 8 in the fourth quarter? That's insane. I'm just looking at the way his teams start.
Yeah.
2020, 4-3, 2021, 3-5, 2022, 3-4, 2023, 5-3 with 3 straight losses, 2024, 3-4.
They've been here before.
He's blown multiple Super Bowl leads.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I go, yeah, he's in the Super Bowl. Good for him. Like, great. You should be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But do you think there's any, like, you are very tied into the NFL community.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people in the Niner kind of fan base that have lost faith in him, that think he can't get them over the hump. What do you think the league, because it's one thing, like you and I go talk to college coaches every week.
Yeah.
And every single week, I'm not exaggerating, somebody on one of those coaching staffs brings up how they watch the 49ers and steal plays from the 49ers.
How about Rutgers just this last week?
Every single week. It happens every single week.
Yeah.
But also, it's more than just about play calling. Now, I've always said, I think this guy's like, you have a coach draft, he's going to the top 5.
Yeah.
Right. Of active coaches.
Yeah.
But I can understand when you're watching the Chiefs and Andy Reid, and Patrick Mahomes has his worst game ever.
ever.
And they still feel like they kick your ass. You're like, well, so where you at? What's your take on all that?
Here's what I would say is the grass ain't always greener on the other side, and be careful what you wish for.
That's true.
Because in this world, head coaches that get to Super Bowls don't grow on trees. And it's really tough to find one that is a fit for your franchise, that's a fit for your franchise's personnel structure, which is, something that's kind of, not thought about a ton, right? Like, is there a general manager, or is that who's got final personnel say? And I know that, that Kyle and John Lynch work together, pretty well in that regard, which is important. But think about all the coaches that have been to the Super Bowl in the NFC in the last few years. Like Nick Sirianni obviously comes to mind, and like people wanted to fire him last year.
Well, and still
it's still kind of due a little.
Doug
bit.
Peterson.
Doug Peterson went to a Super Bowl, got fired 2 or 3 years later.
McVay went back and won it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that coaching right now is not something that I would be ultimately worried about if I was the 49ers. I think right now I need to get players back on the field. And I need to see what this offense looks like when we can be as close to full strength as possible to really judge. Now, I think that they need to make, it's going to be interesting to see with me. Like, I think they need to make some moves this offseason to kind of build this offensive line back for the future. I think that there's, and especially considering whatever happens with Trent Williams. So like they're going to have to make some moves there. I don't think this is the best group that they've had in the Kyle Shanahan tenure. Up front, a little different up front on the defensive side as well. But ultimately, I think this season to this point revolves around getting guys back into the lineup that you can count on.
Yeah.
So until we can really see that, I think it's a little out of bounds to suggest that Kyle Shanahan isn't the one to ultimately get the Niners back over the top.
I got to tell you, I was watching George Pickens on Sunday night going like, maybe they should have traded Brandon
Well,
Ayuk.
yeah,
I know.
yeah. You know what's interesting one to think about for folks out there, and I was talking about this with my buddy Daniel Jeremiah today. Mike Williams is kind of the odd man out in New York, right?
Yeah.
After the Jets acquired Devontae Adams. Like, how interesting would that Pittsburgh offense be with a player like Mike Williams who can go up and get balls the way that Russell Wilson wants to float them up there down the sideline, like we saw to George Pickens a couple of times in that Steelers offense. So like you get another big body receiver out there, maybe he kind of fills a little bit of that void that they were thinking they might get from, another kind of A-list type of receiver in IU. Different players, but
how about that second one where it hits the DB in the back and George Pickens catches it, and then they cut to Devontae, and Devontae's just like, "Oh my god,
what are we doing?" Like,
all I thought was Devontae. You went from the Raiders to the Jets. Bad news. Same luck.
Yes,
same franchise. Not really, but
going well here. He had 9 targets in the game, only caught 3 of them. The Pittsburgh Steelers doubled him up in yards per play. What world did we living in where the Steelers and an Arthur Smith offense averages nearly 10 yards a play and the Jets are 5?
Yeah. All right. You got any big NFL takes I didn't ask you about? Niners or otherwise? What you got?
I think just in the landscape of the Niners, the Chiefs are so different, even going back to last year than they were. So different this year than they are in years past, right? I think it's clear to see. And look, they've dealt with their injuries too. Obviously, Rashee Rice. It was crazy to me how many times the broadcast mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster's name. I was like, what?
Yeah,
he's irrelevant. What are we
I know.
if we're talking about that being an issue for the Chiefs? Like, holy smokes, what have they become?
Narrator, it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, it wasn't an issue, right? And Kareem Hunt's back scoring touchdowns in this team on the ground. Like, what world are we living in where Patrick Mahomes has a 44 passer rating and they beat the reigning NFC champs by 2 scores? We're the short answer is we're living in a world where the Chiefs are one of the most elite, if not the most elite defense in football. Yeah. And again, talked about this. My buddy DJ brought it up, today, and it was just like, this defense feels like some of those epic defenses that we have seen propel teams to Super Bowls in years past, like the Ravens back in the early 2000s when Trent Dilfer was the quarterback. How about the Bucks when, give it to me, Brad Johnson was the quarterback, right? I mean, like, that's what this Chiefs defense is doing now. Like, this is a team that, yes, they have the best quarterback on the planet, but they're winning games with defense. It's crazy to think that in Kansas City. And there's really no reason to suspect, Guy, that that's going to stop, that they can't keep winning this way.
You see, I saw a graph about how young their roster is, and like people who listen to me know I'm probably gotten annoying with it. If you look at their draft, 23, but going back, not this last draft, but 23, 22, 21, they've gotten a ton of production. Like, they have not quite doubled up the Niners, but they're getting like 40% more starts out of those drafts. Now, the Niners' last draft might be a pretty good draft.
Yeah.
Right. Malik Mustafa and like that's Dominic Pooney. That might be a pretty good draft, but they're going to need it. Like, they're going to need it. The Chiefs got to their expensive quarterback before the Niners. Well, now the Niners are.
Yeah. Maybe, now you're going to have to say that. Yeah.
Maybe every time he throws 3 picks, people are like, "Oh, are we sure? Maybe not." Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, that's where we're at on that one for sure. So I don't know. We'll see what the Niners could do here. But I again, like, no one's running away with the NFC West, and that's in their favor.
Yeah. Rhett, it's man, I say always great to see you. I'm going to see you again.
I'm going to see you again.
Rhett's going to you're going to, oh yeah, we got something coming up on Wednesday, Coach with the Wash. He's going to be on Thursday on NFL Network, and then he's going to catch a red eye to his home away from home, Bloomington, Indiana. Well, Indy, and then to Bloomington. And we'll have a humongous football game on Big Ten Network on Saturday. Can't wait.
Biggest game? Like, is this the biggest game we've called?
Well, I mean, the previous one was, I mean, we had SC and number 11 SC Minnesota. That was a big game.
That was a big one.
But this is a big game. Big game. Undefeated. I mean,
undefeated. Jetfish. Let's go.
Your alma mater. Pretty big. Pretty big.
I can't. It's the last time I can do that this week, I think.
All right,
buddy. Thanks.
All right, brother. Thank you.